Hello, my name is Zoe Cavada. For my literature review, I chose to focus on 21st century skills and science assessments being done now. The abstract of my literature review and the main focus was on the 21st century skills and how they're currently being assessed in a science classroom specifically. I looked at different definitions in the literature. I decided to focus on three specific definitions I found in literature, one being from corporate workforce, the second one being from psychologists, and the third one being from educators. I decided in my science assessments to focus particularly on educators' perspective and their definition of 21st century skills. I did find a lot of commonalities between the definitions of the three different perspectives, but I did find one outlier, which I'll discuss in the definition section. So I used the educator's perspective to then look at science assessments being done today. I did find that future research really needs to be looking at more assessments being done and how well they're preparing these students for the real world and their success in participating in today's society. I decided to put this into a website page, which I learned how to do in our 005 class with learning and emerging technologies. The reason I decided to use this multimedia format is because this is my first semester at Empire State College, and I think for my capstone project I would really like to further research this and come up with an assessment on my own. So I wanted to put it into a website so that I can continue as I go through courses to continue to analyze this subject and to collect resources and more assessments and a place to put my assessment ideas. So for the definitions tab, although using different vocabulary, corporations, psychologists, and educators have many commonalities in the way they define 21st century skills. Some include problem solving, collaboration skills, and communication skills. One outlier, as I mentioned on the homepage, that I found in the research was educators defined part of the 21st century skills as scientific literacy, and I did not see this in corporate or psychologist definitions. So just some key words I found in each definition that I found in the literature was corporate workforce employers identify these 21st century skills as employees who are easily able to adapt, they have non-routine problem-solving skills, they have complex communication skills, collaboration skills, critical thinking skills, and creativity skills. So those are specific skills they're looking for in future employees in today's society with our ever-changing technology, with the problems that employees will face and having to solve in groups, whether it be small or large groups, and they recognize that individuals cannot solve these complex problems independently. They need to really be able to work and use their strengths in a group setting to solve these non-routine problems. Psychologists use similar vocabulary. They think that students need to have collaboration skills, adaptability skills. They actually, a study I found says to figure out whether students have those adaptability skills, they use situational judgment assessments, meaning they provide them with a complex problem and they see how students decide they would go about figuring out and solving that problem. So similar to those non-routine problem solving skills that corporate workforce employers identify. Then they say they need to have cognitive skills, intrapersonal skills, interpersonal skills, and technical skills. So again, you're seeing, and I saw in the literature, some very similar vocabulary being used, but maybe in a different sort of language. Then educators have they want to see students having big picture connections, adaptability, creativity, outside the box thinking, problem solving skills, and scientific literacy. So again, very similar. That outlier being that scientific literacy skill that educators believe students need to have in order to be successful participants in today's society. And that big picture connection, this is that creativity thinking, that critical thinking skills, which I'll get into in the assessments part of this, but they're saying that educators need to make sure students know how to make those connections, whether it be using a storyline, and that's where educators use a overall big picture idea, and then they break it down in their curriculum into the individual units, but keeping that big picture in mind. So instead of having isolated units, they show the students how all of these ideas connect for the bigger picture. Okay, moving on to assessments. The assessments discussed in this section are assessments being used in the classrooms today by science educators. They are better and more effective than what has been used in the past. More research needs to be done regarding 21st century skills and science assessments to create more productive assessments that can be used by science educators to better assess students' progress with regards to these skills. So I used specifically the definitions given by educators to then further my research into the assessments being used, just to focus it in a little bit. However, the psychologists and corporate employers also provided their take on assessments that can be used, which I included in my conclusion. So 3 assessments that I found in my research that are being used today that have been proven to be effective are formative assessments, literacy assessment tools, and group work and 2-stage assessments. So formative assessments that are being used today focus more on that big picture and focus less on students memorizing information just to show a mastery of the content. This is providing students with feedback and having students work together to complete these formative assessments, using those collaboration skills, using creativity skills in this, and again using that big picture connection skills that students are going to need in the real world. The literacy assessment tool was something new that I found while doing research. So this suggested that you could use popular books to create and spark conversation in the classroom. So one in particular that I found was using the Harry Potter books in a chemistry class to spark that conversation about the laws of nature and how it could potentially we can potentially break these laws of nature rules that we have now, given our ever-changing and improvement in technology. So this is again, sparking curiosity. It's creating interest. It's showing students creativity in their thoughts with this. It's having them collaborate on projects to use these books and come up with conversations about how these relate to a science topic. It's also using cross-cutting curriculum, so using an an English setting of using a book and incorporating it into a science classroom where you're talking about the book. One thing I found was the NGSS, or the Next Generation Science Standards, wanting to incorporate these cross-cutting ideas, and using this literacy assessment tool would incorporate that idea of using all of these core subjects and bringing them together to have those conversations, to see students' creativity come to life. Then your classic group work that can be used to assess students and how they're doing with these collaboration skills, with the creativity skills, with their communication skills between, whether it's in a small group setting or a larger group class setting. The new one I found was this 2-stage assessment tool. This is including a 2-part assessment. One being where students work individually to complete the assessment, and then the second part of the assessment would be where students work in, whether it be a small or large group setting, to solve a complex problem using non-routine problem-solving skills. So those buzzwords that we saw in all three definitions from the three different perspectives that I provided. So this would be a great incorporation into a science setting. I did see some research where this is being done, and it provided great results. It provided less test anxiety, it provided great relationships between peers, between students and the instructor, and then it also, something that I found in the research was that it also sparked interest in females in the STEM setting, which I thought was a neat, being a female in STEM was a neat finding from this two-stage assessments. Some future ideas I have in my own classroom that I got from the emerging technology course are a virtual reality archaeological dig. This would incorporate technology. It could incorporate collaboration between students where they work together to do the dig. It could spark creativity between students and ideas that they come up with and efficiency in doing the dig. The next one that I came up with in that course was an end of the year review game where they have to escape chemistry class using their content knowledge. So this would be that big picture and making sure that they did not just memorize facts and the content throughout the year, where they and assessing that they actually understand this content and can connect all of those units together. And then the last one I had was this liquids and solution unit assessment project. This is an individualized project that I wanted to do. However, it is using 100% technology. I came up with this idea at the end of the course, given our current situation with distance learning. But this, I would provide students with content, and then they would have to make a multimedia presentation to prove to me that they understand that content. And I actually did it in my class last week, and it worked really well. I was actually able to see students and whether they were understanding the information or not, given the project I gave them. And then lastly, just some conclusions and to wrap this up. So again, as I mentioned, 21st century skills are not a new concept, but these cannot be changed overnight. They can't just be automatically incorporated into our curriculums in school. So this is an ongoing process. There are some assessments already being done. However, more assessments need to be created and analyzed, which leads me to the future research that I think needs to be done. I really think after getting those three definitions from the three different perspectives, I really think it is a really important aspect of this research is to keep that connection between the corporate world and education. A lot of the research I read from corporate world explained this lack of skills that they're seeing in their employees that they're not getting from the classroom. So I think, we can see as educators these assessment scores on paper, we're thinking that they're getting what they need to get out of the course and getting these skills. However, employers might not be seeing this in the real world. So I think that relationship between the two is really great and needs to continue as we come up with more assessments and analyze these assessments even further.